What could cause a Boeing 787 to lose both engines just seconds after takeoff? Engine failure, a technical glitch, or an action taken by someone inside the cockpit? Within the next 2 days, the preliminary investigation report into the tragic crash of Air India flight AI-171 is expected to be officially released. While not yet a final conclusion, the leaked details from the report submitted by the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau (AIB) to the Indian government are already pointing to a shocking possibility. The fuel control switches may hold the key to the entire disaster. Flipping one of these switches from run to cutoff immediately shuts off fuel supply to the engine, causing it to stop mid-air. In fact, technical diagrams from the report clearly show that these switches are designed to prevent accidental activation. And yet, on that ill-fated flight, both fuel switches were found in the cutoff position just seconds after liftoff. This is no longer a fringe theory. Major global news outlets are all reporting the same disturbing implication. Something went terribly wrong inside that cockpit. So the question now is, why? And more importantly, are we truly prepared to face the answer? From the expert analysis of Captain Stevea's seasoned airline captain and aviation psychologist, the evidence pointing to a simultaneous dual-engine failure mere seconds after takeoff is overwhelming. The critical clue lies in the deployment of the RAT almost immediately after the aircraft became airborne. On the Boeing 787, the RAT is not a standard part of flight operations. It only deploys in one of 3 extreme scenarios: a total electrical failure, a complete hydraulic failure, or the loss of both engines. In this case, there were no signs of electrical or hydraulic failure, leading Captain Steve to his early and growing suspicion the engines had likely both shut down. Flight data confirms that the aircraft generated enough lift for takeoff, but within just 10 seconds, a rapid loss of thrust became apparent. Control surfaces such as flaps and slats ceased to function effectively, the nose pitched down, and the aircraft crashed into a residential area just beyond the runway. The early RAT deployment and the sudden loss of lift form a powerful pattern of evidence. According to Captain Steve, this strongly indicates that both engines had shut down almost instantly after liftoff. This brings us to the next question. Why did the engines fail? 2 main theories have emerged. The first, fuel contamination, perhaps the wrong type of fuel or foreign matter in the supply. But the second and far more unsettling possibility is that the fuel flow to the engines was deliberately cut off. If that turns out to be true, then the cause wasn't mechanical. It wasn't software. It wasn't the aircraft. It was a decision made by a human being in the cockpit. Switching the fuel control switches to cutoff is a standard procedure, but only during the end phase of a flight. It is typically performed after the aircraft has landed safely, taxied to the gate, and the parking brake has been set. At that point, the first officer moves both fuel control switches to the cutoff position, the engines shut down, and the flight crew completes final checklist procedures before exiting the cockpit. But in the case of Air India flight AI-171, both switches were moved to cutoff just seconds after the plane left the runway, a move that is not part of any commercial flight procedure. According to multiple independent investigation sources and preliminary reports, both fuel switches were manually set to cutoff, not by automation, not by a technical fault, and not by software error. This is highly unusual, as there is no checklist or emergency procedure during takeoff that calls for this action. Even in the rare event of a dual-engine failure, the switches may be momentarily flipped to cutoff as part of a restart process, but must then be immediately returned to run. Leaving them in cutoff is not permitted. Furthermore, the Boeing 787 is designed to continue safe flight even if one engine fails after takeoff. In simulator tests, pilots have rehearsed a wide range of emergencies from complete electrical failures and hydraulic loss to landing gear malfunctions and flap issues, and none of them resulted in both engines shutting down. Even a single engine failure right after liftoff would still allow the aircraft to climb and continue safely. One theory has been raised: Could the pilot have mistakenly shut off both fuel switches? This possibility is considered nearly impossible. Standard training dictates that if engine failure occurs during takeoff, pilots are trained not to touch any system controls until the aircraft reaches a minimum altitude typically between 400 and 1,000 feet. Only once the plane has climbed, gear retracted and stabilized does the crew begin emergency procedures, guided strictly by the Quick Reference Checklist (QRC) with cross-verification steps. In the case of Flight AI-171, the strongest evidence comes from the deployment of the RAT, which occurred just seconds after the aircraft lifted off. On the 787, RAT only deploys when there is a total loss of electrical power, hydraulic systems, or both engines. Its near immediate deployment indicates that the engines failed almost instantly after takeoff, something that could only happen if both fuel switches were simultaneously shut off. There is no commercial flight procedure either that allows this, and there is certainly no checklist that authorizes keeping both fuel switches in cutoff during takeoff. This was not an accident, and it was not an automatic system reaction, it was a deliberate act, and only a human could have done it. The Boeing 787 was functioning perfectly. There is no evidence of technical issues in its engine systems or avionics, yet both fuel control switches were found in cutoff just seconds after the aircraft left the ground, an action that cannot occur automatically, nor is it supported by any standard flight procedure. Only a human can make that decision. So the question is no longer, did the aircraft malfunction? It becomes, what happened in the cockpit? The cause may lie in an area where aviation has long been hesitant to invest pilot mental health. It wasn't the systems or the procedures that failed. It was the last layer of defense, the human being who no longer functioned as expected. In the standard procedure for handling engine loss, every action is built around dual verification. After reaching a safe altitude, the crew disables the auto throttle, retards the thrust lever to idle, and confirms each step together. Switching the fuel control to cutoff is the final step performed only after all other factors have been carefully verified. Therefore, having both fuel switches shut off within seconds of takeoff, before even reaching the minimum altitude for response, represents a complete deviation from established protocol. No emergency scenario in commercial aviation history has ever called for this to happen so early, and none have permitted leaving both switches in cutoff. Another crucial indicator is the timing of the RAT deployment. Typically, RAT only activates during cruise altitude after both engines have lost power and the system has had time to recognize the failure. But in the Air India AI-171 incident, the RAT deployed within 4 to 5 seconds of takeoff. This suggests that the system immediately detected a total engine shutdown and triggered emergency mode due to airborne logic sensors confirming liftoff. The sequence was too fast, too clean, and too abnormal. In all simulated scenarios, power loss, hydraulics, landing gear failures, premature flap retraction, at least one engine always remains running. Flight control systems are built to adjust and maintain safety even in adverse conditions. The one thing it cannot withstand is a deliberate shutdown initiated by someone inside the cockpit. So what could make a person take such action? Not system failure, not unconscious error, but a breakdown from within, psychological, emotional, or a personal crisis. This is the one variable no software can anticipate and no checklist can fully contain. If the evidence behind Air India AI-171 is accurate, then this was not just a technical incident. It was a cold warning. The aviation industry has invested too much in machines and not enough in the people who fly them. Technology is vital, but investing in humans is what keeps us truly safe. In the end, nothing can obscure the truth. When every possibility has been ruled out, what remains, no matter how hard it is to accept, is still the truth. The Boeing 787 operating Air India flight AI-171 did not suffer a technical malfunction. The engines performed as designed. The aircraft systems were fully functional. And yet, just seconds after takeoff, both fuel control switches were moved to cutoff. The plane lost all thrust. This was not a mechanical error, nor was it a procedural mistake. It was a deliberate act and only a human could have done it. When the fuel switches are shut off, the system immediately recognizes a critical emergency. The RA-10 emergency backup turbine deploys almost instantly, supplying minimal electrical and hydraulic power to maintain flight control. No automatic system in the world would misinterpret such a situation. The RAT's deployment just seconds after liftoff was not a malfunction, it was evidence. Evidence that the aircraft reacted exactly as designed, responding to an extreme action that originated inside the cockpit. This truth may be hard to accept because it lies beyond the realm of engineering. It lies within the human domain. And for that reason, the aviation industry and society at large has no choice but to confront it. To protect what remains: life, trust, and the safety of millions who place their faith in every flight that takes off each day. Inside a sealed steel cockpit cruising thousands of meters above the ground, technology can control almost everything except the human heart and mind. And if we fail to invest adequately in that one element, human beings will remain the weakest link in a system designed for perfection. A crucial but often overlooked fact in this incident is that the fuel control switches on a Boeing 787 cannot be triggered by accident. Unlike a light switch or a simple push button, these switches are engineered with 3 distinct layers of protection to prevent unintended operation. To move a switch from run to cutoff, the operator must grip it firmly with 2 fingers, pull it upward and outward, and then push it through a defined resistance point known as a detent. This is a deliberate and forceful action that cannot happen unconsciously or through an accidental bump. No automated system is authorized or even capable of performing this maneuver, not software, not electrical interference, not mechanical malfunction. Moreover, no commercial aviation procedure has ever instructed pilots to move both fuel switches to cutoff within seconds of takeoff. Thus, the sequence of events can be reduced to 3 undeniable facts. The aircraft lost both engines simultaneously, both fuel switches were moved to cutoff, and only a human someone in the cockpit could have done this. Though the official investigation is still ongoing, its trajectory is unmistakable. This was not a systems failure. It was a deliberate act. And that raises the most difficult and urgent question of all. Why? We may never know the real reason. No black box can record the storm within a person's soul, but as a pilot and aviation psychologist, Captain Steve believes some questions must be asked not to assign blame, but to understand and prevent the next tragedy. With tens of thousands of flight hours and over 30 years of psychological counseling experience, he says, "I've done more therapy sessions at 37,000 feet than on the ground." Why? Because being a pilot is not just about responsibility, it is about isolation. They carry the lives of hundreds. They fly through the night. They are away from home for months. And most of all, they often have no place to unburden their minds. Around 35 years ago, during a training flight, Captain Steve once witnessed a student break down mid-air. The young man had stayed up all night talking his father out of suicide over the phone, then stepped into the cockpit just hours later. Steve immediately stopped the lesson, granted the student a week off, and ensured that both father and son received the help they needed. Since that day, he added one question to every pre-flight briefing. "How are you doing today?" "Seriously, I mean it. Are you okay?" A simple question, but one that could save a life. In aviation, and among those who track its every move, we are taught to put our faith in systems. We place our trust in cross-check procedures, in mutual oversight, in QRC, and standardized protocols. We believe in the layers of technical safeguards carefully engineered, redundantly designed to catch every error before it becomes a catastrophe. Each system is a safety net, each checklist a guardrail. Together, they form a fortress built to keep flight safe. We're taught that if we follow every step, everything will be safe. That if one pilot fails, the other will catch it. That if one system breaks, another will take over. And that if all else fails, the RAT, the emergency turbine, will deploy like the final life raft. But there is one thing no system can reach: the exhausted mind of a human being. No checklist can read the storm behind a steady gaze. No warning light can flash when someone is silently counting down to the worst. No automation is smart enough to recognize when their colleague is crumbling in complete silence. If a pilot doesn't speak up, if the other doesn't ask, if we place absolute faith in switches, buttons, and flashing lights, then even the strongest protections can shatter against the quiet collapse of a human being. And sometimes that silence is what brings a flight down.